So comment, subscribe, dislike, or like. Check out the links in the descriptions for other of my sites, other activities that I'm involved in. Got a whole bunch of Facebook groups you can check out. I play multiple card games, so I do music among other things, so check out the links in the description. So this is my Orzhov God Mode deck. So let's go through the list real quick. 2 Eye Twitch, 4 Redain, 4 Hobbin Zombie, 2 Zombies, 2 Nighthawk Scavenger, 2 Edgar, 4 Doomscars, 4 Wedding Announcement, 4 Curse of Beaches, 4 Meathook Massacre, 4 Soren, 4 Kaya, 6 Plains, 6 Swamps, 4 Bright Climb Pathway, 4 Shatter Sanctum, 4 Fields of Wind. Sideboard consists of 1 Environmental Scientist, 1 Reduced to Memory, 1 Necrotic Fumes, 1 Inkling Summoning, 1 Pest Summoning, 1 Introduction to Annihilation, and 1 Mascot Exhibition. So the idea here is that we want to essentially be able to not care if our opponent's board wipe or if we board. But sometimes you have to board wipe, right? Through the effects of Meathook Massacre or Doomscar. So you want stuff that when they do get destroyed, you get something out of it. Typically, you want to get something out of it, so that's why we got stuff like Eye Twitch, Hobbin Zombie. When it dies, it creates a zombie token. Edgar, when he dies, turns into the legendary artifact, Markov's Coffin, and starts giving you tokens. So start re-establishing our board after a board wipe. Then we have stuff like Wedding Announcement, which will inherently give us tokens after we start playing it, but then eventually it'll flip over and power up all our creatures. Curse of Leeches will help us gain life as well as make our opponent lose life, so our life will go up, our opponents will go down, and life gain is definitely useful when you want to stay in the game longer. By staying in the game longer, your chances of winning are higher, and essentially you want to be in God mode, right? You want to be in a situation where it's very, very hard to beat you, but we have obviously Texture Shield, which will prevent 1 damage from us, 1 damage on our creatures, as well as our planeswalkers, from attacks, as well as from effect damage. Also, it essentially gives us and our permanents ward 1, where our opponent has to pay 1 extra if they're going to target any of our cards. And if they can't afford it, of course, the card gets countered. So that definitely puts us on God mode when we have inherent counter order. Everything has built-in mana leak, basically, right? Like I said, we got stuff that floats, so when it dies, they give us something, put something on board. Then, of course, we got, essentially Rafagara, we got Doomscar, we got Meathook Massacre for board wiping, so we can always have dominant control over the board. Soren to give us tokens, obviously, to help us establish a board, as well as gain life. And gotta have flyers. Notice that Eye Twitch is a flyer, Redain is a flyer, Nighthawk Scavenger is a flyer. Gotta have those to defend ourselves with against our opponent's flyers, like angels and dragons, right? Then we have Kaya, with her ability to give something a ghost form counter, so that way when the creature dies, we get a 1/1 flying token that we obviously can use to protect our planeswalkers with, as well as be able to just, maintain a board so we're not running out of gas. As you can see, not much of draw engine other than Soren. He's obviously, his +1 ability is our deck's draw engine. And just being able to always maintain a board is important. So one of the things is that I typically rely on Protector's Shield to help me keep my creatures on. Because, people can have, kill spells or cards to deal damage to try to kill creatures, or what is that card called? Blizzard Brawl, stuff like that. Like, that battle spells. So anything that can force creatures to attack each other, essentially, right? This does work against Blizzard Brawl. So it's just a way of making things smarter. I of course use this with things that already have ward, so this just kind of like adds ward 1 to whatever has ward. Like if it has ward 1, then technically it's ward 2. You get the idea. It just makes the game harder for our opponent, which is God mode. Makes the game easier for us, harder for our opponent. So that's the idea of God mode, because just adding layers of protection on top of layers of protection, right? So, for example, if you have protector shit out there, right, and you have, let's say, having a zombie, right? The zombie being able to replace itself, that's one level of protection from, some destruction effect. If the destruction effect is targeting, then we have protector shield, making it cost more to try to destroy the creature. But if they do manage to destroy the creature will replace itself. So, right? It forces our opponent to have to board wipe in order to try to get rid of our creatures more often than trying to target them. So that's the good thing. But then if you use Kai's ability on Hobbling a Zombie, for example, you're adding a third layer. So again, if they manage to be able to afford to pay to kill our creature if they're targeting it, then our creature will do something like Archfish, for example, will help us learn so we can go grab something from our sideboard. And then Kaya's ability will make a token to replace it. And of course, our opponent had to tap more more mana in order to play whatever they're playing, so that slows them down. So that it makes it where they can only play like 1 or 2 cards a turn. They can't play a kill spell and then a creature, for example. They have to choose between one or the other. And that type of instance. So. And plenty of times this has countered a lot of my opponent's cards because they were either unaware or they forgot that this was on board and that it wasn't easy to just kill my stuff. So that's a basic rundown of the idea of just always making sure that even after a board wipe, you still have a board, right? So your opponent has a board wipe again. But I was in the gameplay. I think one of the you'll see it in one of the gameplay. In the gameplay video, one of the videos showcased my opponent blood and snowing me over and over again, 3 times. They blood and snow me 3 times. Only board wiped once myself. So there was 4 board wipes used in that duel. But I still had stuff on board, right? After the fact, I still had stuff on board. Typically, you have nothing on the board. After a board wipe. But the idea is to try to make sure you still do have something, or at least you're not losing to board wipes. So this is anti-board wipe, right? In a way. Then, of course, Mihawk Massacre itself is a win con, as well as a Curse of Leeches. Having these in play themselves is essentially a win con. Because if you have Mihawk Massacre and you have a lot of creatures, especially if you made a lot of tokens through Soren, through Kaya's ability, through Wedding Announcement, even through Edgar, through Goblin Zombie. So as long as you just have a lot of creatures, and then you board wipe, then you trigger Mihawk Massacre, make your opponent lose life equal to the number of your creatures that die. And of course, you gain life for all the creatures that your opponent dies. So that combination, just Mihawk Massacre and then board wipe, or just playing Mihawk Massacre will trigger, because it itself is a board wipe, right? So you play it, and you have a lot of creatures, so you can end your opponent out that way. sometimes your opponent's just low on life, and you're just like, all right, instead of attacking or try to deal damage that way, I just play MISCS Massacre and bang game. So those are win cons in itself. So definitely, if your opponent has 10 or less life, and you have a lot of creatures, they're putting themselves in a bad position. You can just end them out with a MISCS Massacre. Curse of Leeches, of course, helps you get them down to less than 10 life, of course, through the effect of making them lose a life and you gain a life, so it helps you stay in the game longer. And then sometimes if your opponent can't play anything or doesn't play anything, their turn, bang, Leeching Lurker comes out and you have a 4/4 lifelink, so you can speed up the process of getting your opponent to have less than 10 life. And of course, you gain life in the process, which will help you stay in the game long enough to, draw your MISCS Massacre and finish off the game that way, or any other method in here that we can use to finish the game. Nighthawk, mainly for the fact that he's a flyer, gotta have a way to defend against flyers. Death Touch, there's some creatures that are flying that have like Shroud or Hexproof or something of that nature, something that would make it hard to target. Granted, we use board wipes, so we don't worry about targeting as much since we use target effects like that, but just saying in general, this helps us against creatures that otherwise would be hard to get rid of. Especially if this stuff has ward or something similar to that, since this doesn't target. And then lifelink, so the ability to block a flyer, gain some life in the process, which can help us stay in the game longer, and kill the threat at the same time is very helpful. Of course, with Protector Shield on the field, it protects our creatures, so it makes it harder for our creatures to die through battle. That's the other aspect, the God mode, right? Because there'll be times where my opponent will attack, and I'll just be like, alright, I'll block with this, right? And then no damage gets dealt to either one of my creatures, and my opponent's creatures die. It's like, there you go, God mode, right? It's like, you attack with something strong, I'll block with 2 weak monsters, but my monsters lived and yours died. God mode, right? So that's the meaning behind the name God mode. It's just the idea of like all my stuff is like having God mode cheat code, right? It's like, yeah, my stuff is really, really good. I put these cards onto the field and I'm pretty much playing on easy mode, God mode. It's easy for me to do stuff because inherently everything synergizes in a way that puts me on God mode, right? And Fields of Ruin, obviously, for man lands, because sometimes it's hard to border wipe a man land, right? You know what I mean? So we need Fields of Ruins to help us with those problematic situations. Some decks had the scenario where they're like countering everything, right? So it'd be hard to, kill their creatures or man land or planeswalker. It's hard to play when your opponent's trying to stop everything you're doing, just so they can kill you with a man land, right? So Fields of Ruin comes in handy in that regards because obviously it's not a spell, so they can't counter it. And you can play it anytime. You can play on your opponent's turn, your turn, so you can play on their end phase. I've had a scenario where my opponent, try to bring out one of their man lands, and I'm just like, boop, Field of Ruins. You're not attacking me with that. Mentioned before, shields, Protector Shield, prevents 1 damage from your creatures, as well as it can prevent 1 damage from you. So it's good against burn decks that have a lot of 1/1s, like 1/1 tokens. R1's Epiphany makes 1/1, flying tokens. This helps protect against that and helps reduce any damage from a lot of strong creatures, like man lands and things of that nature. So you always want to put shields up and then, do everything else from that regard. It also prevents, 1 damage from your planeswalkers, so a lot of times your planeswalkers will survive an attack, mainly because you have this stuff there. And that's the end of the video.